Fantasy football drafters love rookies this time of year. But what if I told you there's a second round running back in a great situation that the market is just getting wrong? And the flip side of that rookie love, drafters keep failing to learn their lessons on the veteran running backs falling down the board. Well, Jared and I are waiting to scoop those values, and we're sharing our favorite targets with you on today's episode. An all new Draft Sharks podcast starts right now. Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to talk through the 2025 running back rankings. And before we get to it, Jared, I think it's important to note for everyone, this show is powered entirely by AI. And by that, of course, I mean actual intelligence. And I'm not going to waste time on that conversation other than to say that you can trust that all the material, the opinions, the recommendations, and most importantly, the projections are coming from us, are coming from a small staff of actual people who have played, who continue to play, who will always play lots of fantasy football across formats. And those projections are going to factor heavily into our discussion today because we're focused on those RB rankings. Like I said, we're going to specifically look at the default half PPR running back rankings on DraftSharks.com. You can, of course, find other formats available on the site right now. And if you sync your league, then you can find specific draft rankings tailored to your exact league scoring and settings. On this show, we're going to reveal the top 3 tiers of our RB rankings. We're going to talk about the guys that we are specifically targeting in our drafts right now, and we'll talk about some prominent names that we are fading. These rankings do not represent the order in which we have these guys by the baseline projections. That is our starting point, but we also factor in stuff like ceiling and floor projections. We factor in consensus projections, what the market thinks of them. It gives you a holistic view of the player's value and his outlook, much more than what standard rankings do. Before we get to the rankings, I want to apologize to anybody who's watching on YouTube for the state of my left eye. Trust me, I'm trying to minimize the impact for you as much as possible. Jared, is it super distracting, or are you able to still hear my words?
Looks like you got clocked in a bar fight. So
I kind of wish it were that good a story because then, it would look like they got in one good shot and then I took the person down, but
right.
It's really just being old and having goofy stuff happen to your face. But, I'm working through it, trying to make it not be too bad for you on video. We're here to talk running back rankings. So right now, let's get to that top 13 in our half PPR ranks. And Jared, it starts with tier 1, Saquon Barkley at 1, Bijan Robinson at 2, Christian McCaffrey at 3. It's a clear tier 1. I don't think it takes a whole lot of discussion. Maybe the biggest point from it is somebody who's missing versus ADP and is going to come up in our next tier.
I think you're going to see Saquon Barkley and Bijan Robinson as running back 1 and running back 2. And basically any rankings you look at, I've kind of gone back and forth on them all offseason, which one I prefer. And if you look at our rankings right now, we have Saquon Barkley just ahead in half PPR. We have Bijan Robinson just ahead in full PPR. So if you're doing enough drafts, drafting in enough different formats, that's how I'd break the tie. If you're in half PPR, take Saquon. He's the better touchdown bet. Bijan in full PPR because Bijan has the better role. That's what's working in his favor. If you look at expected fantasy points per game over the second half of last season when Bijan really started getting workhorse usage, he had the better role. He had the more valuable fantasy role than Barkley. So that's kind of the argument in favor of Bijan. You can't go wrong. These are two studs who are the focal points of their offenses.
Yeah, if you're drafting a bunch of teams, I think you want to get some of both of these guys regardless of format. I'm with you. The more that reception scoring counts, the more Bijan Robinson makes sense. Christian McCaffrey has climbed into round 1 comfortably in there by underdog ADP right now. He's at number 9 overall, still 4th in running back ADP though. So he's the relative value here. And I'm still drafting him in the second half of round 1. I'm not backing off just because he's less likely to be available at the 1-2 turn.
I think he's getting closer to fairly priced, but I still think he's a nice target anywhere in those last 3 or 4 picks of round 1. It's really because of the ceiling. You look at our ceiling projections for Christian McCaffrey. He actually beats Saquon Barkley in our PPR ceiling projections. He's just behind in half PPR. And you only have to look back to 2023 when Christian McCaffrey scored 22.6 half PPR points per game. Saquon Barkley, for as massive a season he had last year, 20.9 half PPR points per game. So almost 2 fewer points per game than McCaffrey scored just a couple of years ago. We know there's some injury risk here, and McCaffrey's getting up there in age, but we even saw it last year. In the 3 games he was healthy, he remained 49ers workhorse, played 88% of the team's offensive snaps, 14.3 carries, 5.3 targets per game. When he's healthy, he's going to be the focal point of this offense. So on a per game basis, McCaffrey is right there with Saquon and Bijan.
It's okay to be a little wary of McCaffrey, but if you're thinking about fading him, ask yourself this: do you think that he still can lead the position in scoring? If you say no, then I don't really know what to tell you. And if you say yes, then don't fade him completely. Make sure you're at least mixing in some McCaffrey.
For sure. And if you're someone that's only doing like a few drafts, like I'm not even opposed to passing on McCaffrey because I get the downside. But yeah, if you're a high volume drafter, I would not be taking a fade position on CMC.
Tier 2 in our half PPR running back rankings: Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Ashton Jeanty. Of course, Gibbs, the guy I was referring to, that's going to be in tier 1. In most cases, he's in that top group by ADP. We've talked about him on here before. Not a guy to dislike, but just going a little too early for me versus his usage from last year, and I think what is likely to happen this year. So somebody that I'm fading at a relative level versus his price. And Jared, I think that within this tier, it's worth noting that Ashton Jeanty is RB7 officially by these rankings. He's RB5 in ADP. Now, at that level of the rankings, you would look at that difference and be like, okay, Draft Sharks doesn't like Ashton Jeanty. They're saying don't draft him. This, I think, is where tiers are really important as opposed to just looking at straight rankings. So yeah, Jeanty is a few spots behind Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, and that might generally make you think, okay, DS is saying take those guys and pass on Jeanty. That's not how I would do it. Maybe if you're drafting 1 team or 2 teams, maybe. Whatever format you're playing, though, however much you're drafting, Jeanty is not somebody that I would say to fade. I think he belongs in this tier. I would take him straight up over Jahmyr Gibbs. And the more you're drafting, I think the more you want to make sure to include him among your picks in this range.
Yeah, definitely don't want to be out on Ashton Jeanty. We know how good of a prospect he is. We talked on the coaching changes episode about, Chip Kelly and how he's been a fast-paced play caller and a run-leaning play caller. That's good news for Ashton Jeanty. And then you just look at the draft capital Jeanty got going inside the top 10 in the NFL draft. The last 6 running backs to go top 10 in the NFL draft, and that was Todd Gurley, Zeke Elliott, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson. 5 of those 6 guys got at least 16 touches per game as rookies. 4 of the 6 got 19 plus touches per game. Only 9 running backs hit that mark last year. And then 3 of the 6 got 22 plus touches per game as rookies. Only 2 running backs hit that mark last year. So Jeanty, just based on the draft capital, is a really strong bet to, finish top 10 among running backs in touches per game. Only reason I don't draft more of Ashton Jeanty is because I would rather take a wide receiver in that mid-first round and then get Jonathan Taylor in the mid-second round, who to me projects very similarly to Ashton Jeanty. He's going to get a big workload, I believe. I think he's still going to be the focal point of that Colts offense. And to me, the more bad news we get about Anthony Richardson and the more it looks like Daniel Jones might be the Colts week 1 starter, might end up starting more games than Richardson, that's just good news for Jonathan Taylor, because we talked about this on recent shows as well. Taylor was just, his role and production was much better in games without Richardson last year, which makes sense. I mean, first of all, the Colts offense was just better without Richardson. And then 2, you don't have Richardson stealing carries and especially goal line carries. So I think if you think it's going to be Daniel Jones under center, and I'm kind of leaning that way at this point to open the season, I think that makes Jonathan Taylor an even better pick in round 2 of fantasy drafts.
I agree with all that. Jeanty is a guy that I want to mix in that range just because we don't know what the ceiling is yet, but he's not a specific target for me. And just to drill down on those tiers a little bit further, Jeanty is pretty close in 3D value to Henry and Taylor, which is why he's in this tier with these guys. He is way ahead of our next tier of running backs. So that shows you the separation much more than the difference between, Henry at 4, Taylor at 5, and Jeanty at 7. Tier 3 kicks off with Devon Achane. Then we've got Josh Jacobs, Kyren Williams, Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Joe Mixon rounding out the tier. Jared, I want to start with Achane, not just because he's at the top, but he's in this tier with these next 5 guys that I mentioned. The gap between Achane and Jacobs within this tier, 2 players right next to each other, is larger than the gap between McCaffrey at the end of tier 1 and the guys at the top of tier 2. So even though this looks like a tier, I think there is some separation between Achane and the rest of the guys in this group.
There is, and I think scoring system matters for Achane just as much, if not more, than any of these guys we talked about so far. Is obviously more valuable in PPR. You look at our PPR rankings, he actually jumps up into that tier with your, Jeanty, Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor's. Loses a bit of value in half PPR because of all the value he gets from his pass catching. Achane was second among running backs last year with 87 targets. We'll see if that continues. I do think Miami would rather have more targets going to the wide receivers and fewer to Achane and Jonnu Smith in 2025. So we'll see. I think they're going to need better offensive line play for that to happen, though. And if Achane does get better offensive line play, like, that's obviously not a bad thing. It's only going to help his rushing efficiency. So whether it comes on the ground or in the passing game, I think Achane is a pretty safe bet to continue producing at least like mid-range RB1 production in fantasy this season.
Josh Jacobs versus Kyren Williams. I'm taking Williams still straight up over Jacobs if I'm making that decision. We have 2 straight years of Williams getting the kind of work and offering the kind of production that Jacobs did last year in his first season for Green Bay. That said, I do think it's worth noting that the Packers have actually been the more consistently good offense under Matt LaFleur than the Rams have under Sean McVay, looking at scoring and total yards. So I am forcing myself to mix in some Jacobs, even though I'm a little bit wary of him at his elevated cost this year.
We're actually a bit ahead of ADP on Jacobs in terms of like running back ranking. We have him RB9. He's RB10 in ADP. So I don't think he's overpriced at the position. To me, I prefer the wide receivers in the range Jacobs is going, like the late second, early third round. But I mean, Jacobs was really good last year. He was top 8 among 47 qualifying running backs in yards after contact per attempt, PFF rushing grade, PFF elusive rating. And then he also had an awesome role. He was RB8 in expected half PPR points per game. He led all running backs and carries inside the 5 and expected rushing touchdowns. So really nothing against Jacobs, the player. It's just kind of the wide receivers we're comparing him against. Kyren Williams is a tough one for me. The role is awesome, right? He was RB4 in expected half PPR points per game. So his role is even better than Josh Jacobs last year. Got 19.8 carries per game. He led all running backs in red zone carries. He was third among running backs in carries inside the 5. 2 issues I have with Kyren is, one, he doesn't do a lot in the passing game, right? Just 2.5 targets per game last year. And then his efficiency, and this has really been a couple of years now, it's just kind of okay. I don't think he's an awesome running back. I think it's more the role he has in that Sean McVay offense. So that makes him a bit scary. If McVay decides to use more Blake Corum, decides to use more Jarquez Hunter this season, that could really hurt Kyren Williams. But we know the upside. He could definitely be a top 6 half PPR running back again if he stays in the role he's been in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's okay to ask those questions, I think, about Kyren Williams. I would just caution anybody against fading him for that reason, because a year ago, we were like, they took Blake Corum in round 3. They're probably going to take some work away from Kyren Williams. They didn't. He got absolutely as much work share last year as he did the year before. So now it's like, but now they've got Jarquez Hunter and he's faster than the other 2 guys. Yeah, and he's also a 4th round pick. So I'm not going to assume that the guy that was a workhorse, one of the biggest workhorses in the league the past 2 years. 2 years ago, Kyren Williams was the biggest workhorse. And last year, his total opportunity share would have also led the league in 2023. So I'm not going to assume right now that changes significantly. We'll see closer to the season. Maybe we get to August and we have more signals that they really do want to lessen that workload. But right now, I'm not going to assume too much on that front. And then we'll see where it goes. Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Joe Mixon close out this group. We've talked about Joe Mixon a lot. We'll continue talking about Joe Mixon a lot because the market kind of requires us to at this point. Breece Hall, the questions are obvious. How does Justin Fields affect them? What does the new coaching staff mean? We'll kind of see how that develops through the summer. Bucky Irving's interesting. I think we've talked about him some. I'm wary of a running back at his size, just assuming that his late season workload is going to be pushed ahead and be his full season workload this year, because I'm not sure he's built for that. I think they do want to spread the ball around more than that. And I think that chips into his safety at this level of the draft. I also, though, want to highlight the Bucs offense, because Tampa Bay last year finished 4th in scoring, 3rd in yards. The year before, they were 20th in scoring, 23rd in yards, with basically the same set of players outside of Bucky Irving. They were 7th in offensive DVOA last year, 20th in offensive DVOA the year before. So maybe this whole offense is just that much better. I think it's more likely, though, that the whole offense slides back at least a little bit, and that's going to chip away at the running back along with the questions about just how much work he gets.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the big difference between 2023 and 2024 in Tampa was Liam Cohen, who's now gone. So I could definitely see this offense taking a step back. I don't think it'll take a step back to, the 20th place ranking that they were in 2023 or whatever, but a step back is definitely possible. I don't like being like lower than consensus on Bucky Irving because, I mean, man, we liked him as a prospect coming in last year, and he was so good last year. First among 47 qualifying running backs in yards after contact per attempt, 7th in PFF rushing grade. And then even in the passing game, 2nd in PFF receiving grade, 6th in yards per route run. So just super efficient. Their new OC, Josh Grizzard, had a comment like, we want the backfield to look this season kind of how it did at the end of last season. And that was when Bucky Irving was like the clear lead back. So my issue is he's RB9 in ADP, and he goes like mid-second round, sometimes late second round, usually. Tough price for me to pay for Bucky, especially when I can get Breece Hall a round to a round and a half later. I know Hall was disappointing last year, but I was in an Aaron Rodgers offense. We know Rodgers likes to be the man in his offense. The Jets finished dead last in rush attempts as a team last year. I think they're going to shift from one of the pass heaviest offenses in the NFL to one of the run heaviest offenses in the NFL. Justin Fields is going to be a big part of that ground game, obviously. I still think Breece Hall is going to kind of emerge as like the clear best running back in New York. I still believe in this player. I know, again, he disappointed last year, but just turned 24. He was the 36th overall pick of his draft. He was RB7 in half PPR points per game as a rookie, RB5 in 2023. So I'm willing to bet on a bounce back from Breece Hall, especially when you can get him in the back half of round 3.
And by the way, that 2023 season was coming off the ACL, so he might still have upside beyond that. So yeah, I like being in on Breece Hall, and then we'll see as we get closer to the season what the signals are on how his work is going to look. That's our top 13 for half PPR. Yours is probably going to look at least a little bit different because there are lots of ways to vary fantasy scoring. And really, that's the whole reason that the Draft War Room exists. That's why we have the sync to import your scoring and lineup rules. That's why we have more than just straight rankings guiding you through your draft. I mentioned before what goes into our 3D values that actually determine these player rankings. Once you're in your Draft War Room, ADP for your specific format will also apply, because getting your guy is always nice, but it's even better if you can get your guy next turn because you already claimed another one of your guys at that previous turn, following what the market is allowing you to do. That's how you win championships. So, I mean, if you're satisfied just taking the next guy from your draft list, that's fine. And I'm sure that you're going to do very well in your 1996 fantasy league. Jared, let's switch now to specific player targets for us. Who are some of the guys at running back that you were targeting in your drafts?
We got to mention Alvin Kamara again. I feel like we've talked about him on multiple shows already this offseason, but I just want to mention him quick. He's RB20 in underdog ADP. This guy was RB6 in half PPR points per game last year and RB1 in expected half PPR points per game. I'm really expecting his role to change that much for him to drop off that much where he's RB20 in ADP. I think it's a pretty crazy price tag. I'm definitely taking a lot of Alvin Kamara in like round 5. Isaiah Pacheco is a target for me. This guy obviously was bad coming off a broken leg last year, but the guy broke his leg in the middle of the season. I'm not sure we should have expected him to, come back and be good. He was
not
running
even
back
the middle,
15.
by the way. It was week 2, I think.
Yeah, but Pacheco, when healthy, this guy was RB15 in half PPR points per game in 2023. And even last year, before the leg injury, he was the feature back before going down in his 2 full games. He finished RB17 and RB19 in half PPR points per game those 2 weeks, 17 carries and 4 targets per game. To me, if this guy is even close to what he was pre-leg injury, and I think he will be now that he's going to be, almost a year removed come week 1, I think he's going to go back to being the feature back in, one of the 5 best offenses in the NFL.
I think letting Alvin Kamara go 20th among running backs is failing to learn a lesson from last season. Isaiah Pacheco is my single most drafted player at any position still on drafters. Most of that is from pre-NFL draft. He's now down nearly 2 rounds in ADP. By down, I mean like earlier in ADP from where he was going before the NFL draft. A great reason to, spread your drafting throughout the year if you do some high volume best ball drafting. Marshawn Lloyd is my second most drafted running back. Another guy that's a bit of a holdover from pre-draft. He's going earlier in drafts now, but still not nearly early enough to change whether he is actually a target at cost for me. Since the NFL draft, my most drafted running backs include Jalen Wright at his 172 overall ADP. Shane highlighted him in our most recent Sleepers video. He's probably the number 2 running back in Miami. And that's number 2 in a backfield with a guy in Achane that's not going to be a dominant number 1. So there should be plenty of touches available. Jalen Wright might get a little bit more frustrating when we get into lineup setting leagues, but for best ball purposes, at the very least, we're talking about a speedy guy with big playability in a Mike McDaniel backfield. So I don't think there's anything to not like at his ADP. Joe Mixon, still always like, his ADP now is lower than it was before the NFL draft, and them signing Nick Chubb is certainly not going to make him go earlier. So I just go ahead and put Joe Mixon on my list of RB targets from here on. And then I wanted to focus on this pocket of right behind Wright and Mixon. If I'm looking at my drafters exposures, there's this pocket of 5 running backs that are tied for how much I've drafted them so far. And the most interesting names to me in that group were Christian McCaffrey and Quinshad Judkins. Again, these are all post-NFL drafts, so McCaffrey's going a little bit higher. But like I said, he's still going in a range where I'm going to go ahead and target him because I do think he has, in that full PPR especially, the upside to not only lead running backs, but the upside for McCaffrey is being multiple points per game ahead of everybody else at the position. Maybe he doesn't actually still have that ceiling, but I don't know yet that he doesn't still have that ceiling. And if anything, his receiving outlook in San Francisco has gotten more attractive now than it was heading into last season. The other guy is Quinshad Judkins. And Jared, I think I just realized this week how much I like Quinshad Judkins at his price. He's going at the bottom of RB2 territory. He's going way too close to some of his rookie classmates because he's in the situation where it sure looks to me like the Browns drafted him to be at least their lead back and maybe a workhorse. They took him 36th overall, so 4 picks into round 2, to a team that has been among the run heaviest in the league under Kevin Stefanski, dating back to his time as Minnesota's OC before he became the Cleveland head coach. Like that, you might forget that because last year's Browns threw the ball a lot. That's because the running backs weren't very good and Jameis Winston came into the lineup. That's going to pump up your passing volume. But Quinshad Judkins, well set up to get a lot of touches and showed throughout college that he's a very good player.
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of the other rookie running backs seem overvalued to me. You know, Amarian Hampton, Travion Henderson, I haven't been drafting much of them. Even RJ Harvey before the J.K. Dobbins signing was going a bit too, like he was like RB 18 on Underdog. That was a bit too pricey for me, but Judkins is the one rookie running back that I think is at least fairly priced. I think the concern with him is just the Browns offense in general, but to me, Kevin Stefanski is one of the best like 5 play callers in the NFL. So I think he can do enough to at least make that offense serviceable, and Judkins can get enough work as the feature back there to pay off the price tag. 2 other targets for me is more like mid-range guys, and they're kind of similar. Jaylen Warren and Tyjae Spears. You know, I think they're both probably their teams like 1B backs to open the season, but I think they both can do enough to even have standalone value at their costs. Jaylen Warren at RB 32 in ADP, Tyjae Spears at RB 41 in ADP. Both guys dealt with injuries, but Warren, his final 11 games, kind of after dealing with injuries early on, got back up to 4.5 yards per carry, so he was plenty efficient. He was 35th among running backs and expected half PPR points per game over that span. So I think he's kind of like priced at his floor if Caleb Johnson plays the Najee Harris role. But, you know, we're not sure Caleb Johnson's going to be ready for that. I think there's a chance that Warren gets a bigger piece of this backfield and easily outproduces his price tag. And then kind of same deal with Spears. He was just all sorts of banged up throughout last season, but he was still RB 32 in his 9 healthy games, the games that he didn't either miss or leave early. And then his efficiency was just much, much better in his rookie season when he wasn't dealing with all those injuries. And you had Brian Callahan back in May say, quote, hopefully that division of labor gets a little more evenly distributed, talking about Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. So I think they see that they probably just by necessity had to give Pollard more work than they wanted to because Spears dealt with all those injuries last year. But I think if Spears stays healthier this year, you're going to see more of a split between those two guys. And I think, again, at RB 41, Spears can beat that even if Pollard stays healthy. And then if Pollard goes down, you know, Spears is pretty easily at least an RB2, maybe even upside into RB1 range.
Yeah, I think that we need to start the season assuming that Tyjae Spears is going to be clearly behind Tony Pollard because that's how they operated last year, but hoping that that's going to change and thinking that there's a chance for it to change because the coach has said for 2 straight off seasons that he wants to give Spears more work than what we saw in 2023, in 2024. I think that the market just has the Pittsburgh backfield wrong right now. Caleb Johnson, Najee Harris is gone. He was a first-round pick. He was a high-volume receiver in college. He came into the league with a better speed score than Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson's a third-round pick. So right now, Caleb Johnson is probably a better player than Najee Harris right now. But if we're just looking at the investment and the expectation for the Steelers on both players, they didn't draft Caleb Johnson like, okay, here's our new starting running back. They drafted him like, okay, here's a guy that's going to help our backfield. And I think if Jaylen Warren came into the league as an undrafted free agent and worked his way past Najee Harris as a receiver and proved to be the more efficient runner in that backfield than this guy that Pittsburgh drafted in round 1 and made a workhorse right away, I'm going to start out assuming that he's splitting the backfield with Caleb Johnson rather than working behind him. And, we'll see as we get closer to the season if my expectation should change versus that. But right now, I'm looking at those guys as not 1A, 1B, but like the two guys. And Jaylen Warren is the much better bet for receiving among those two. We always talk about how targets are worth a lot more than carries. So I don't understand why anybody would not assume that Jaylen Warren is going to score more fantasy points, just as the starting assumption. Like you can have them close, but it would be Jaylen Warren here, Caleb Johnson here, with the potential for that gap to grow in Jaylen Warren's favor.
Yeah, that's my thing. And if you look at our half PPR rankings, we have them back to back. Now in full PPR, Warren passes Caleb Johnson, but to me, it's just the prices. They're priced as if Caleb Johnson's going to just step into the Najee Harris role and Warren's going to stay in his role. That's possible. I don't think it's the most likely scenario. And again, even if that is the most likely scenario, you have Caleb Johnson, basically priced like at his ceiling, like the best case scenario. Warren is, close to the floor, kind of the worst case scenario he's going to get as far as role. So there's just so much more profit potential on Jaylen Warren at his price right now.
And by the way, 2023 found a healthy Jaylen Warren outscoring Najee Harris in those two roles. So we want to know who you are targeting at running back in your drafts right now. Let us know in the comments section for the show, or you can come hit us up on the Draft Sharks subreddit. You can find the link for that in the show notes for this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast or follow wherever you take it in. You're going to want to know about our upcoming episodes on the wide receiver rankings, on the tight end rankings, and even on the IDP rankings if you like fantasy football that way. Jared, let's close it out with the negative. We'll talk about players that we're fading. Who are you looking to not draft at running back?
I mentioned the rookies, Marion Hampton, RB15 on Underdog, Travion Henderson, RB21. I probably have more of an issue with that one even. I just think, and even listening to how the Patriots have talked about Henderson so far, like they like his pass catching and his explosive playmaking ability, but I don't think they view him as a high volume back. I think Ramondre Stevenson is going to remain involved enough, or I think Henderson's going to have a tough time paying off that price tag. I get it on Underdog because so much of the prize pool is backloaded in the final few weeks, and the rookies, like Hampton especially, is more likely to be even a fantasy RB1 over the final couple months of the season if he, kind of pushes Najee Harris aside. So I get it on Underdog. I think if you're drafting them at those prices in, regular fantasy leagues, I think they're a bit overpriced. My other fade is James Cook, who is RB14 in ADP right now. The bigger issue for me is that he's going around or more ahead of guys like Joe Mixon, Ken Walker, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, where I like all those guys in the same tier as James Cook. Some of them we even have ranked higher than James Cook. Cook, obviously, coming off the massive touchdown season last year, that helped him finish RB10 in half PPR points per game, but he was just RB24 in expected half PPR points per game. I think he's more likely to finish at least closer to RB24 than RB10 this season. I would not be surprised if Ray Davis takes on a bit of a bigger role this season. He looked good when he got opportunities last year. James Cook, we know, is heading into the final year of his deal. I don't think he has a future in Buffalo beyond this year, so that's a reason to maybe push, some more action towards Ray Davis this year. So Cook's just someone I'm not taking when I can get those other running backs a round or two later.
Totally agree on James Cook. He is the cover boy for Kevin's Bills team preview on draftsharks.com right now for just that reason, because there's lots of room for Cook to disappoint you at his draft cost this year. And just to add some context to that discrepancy between his actual fantasy points last year and his expected fantasy points, in tying for 24th among running backs in expected half PPR points per game last year, he ranked behind Kareem Hunt, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Najee Harris, and Ramondre Stevenson. Now, I'm not saying any of those guys is going to outscore James Cook this year, but that shows you the level of work that he was getting and just how easy it's going to be for him to disappoint you versus his cost by simply scoring fewer touchdowns. That was the biggest thing driving his value last year. Good point on the Underdog ADP as well. It's valuable ADP. That's why we use it as kind of the baseline for right now. But it's also important to understand that people there are drafting for a different format than you will be if you're playing elsewhere. It's a playoff best ball tournament. So you certainly want to win the regular season, but you ultimately need to win week 15, week 16, week 17 to get that money. So you want somebody with that ultimate upside, that ultimate 1 week upside, like Travion Henderson, where it's a lot easier for him to be the guy that you needed to have in weeks 15 and 16 than it is for him to be the guy that you needed to have all season. Chuba Hubbard is another guy kind of within that frame for me, where if you're drafting a bunch of underdog teams, I wouldn't avoid Chuba Hubbard totally at his RB17 ADP, because it will be a lot easier for him to be the guy that you needed to have in week 17 than it will be for him to turn into the guy that you needed to have all season. He's a little bit different than James Cook because Chuba Hubbard did have the expected points last year. He scored fantasy points at a surprising level, but he also tied for 8th among all running backs and expected half PPR points per game. So he was getting the touches. He lived up to them scoring wise. The reason that I'm not drafting him, even though he's down to RB17 in ADP, is because I still don't think Chuba Hubbard is that good a player, especially on the receiving front. And I think he's going to easily lead that backfield in rushing this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina took some of the receiving stuff away, and they probably should, because he's really not that good at it. And if you look at the running backs that they added to the backfield this year, Rico Dowdle, Trevor Etienne, neither guy excites you as a runner. They're both probably better as receiving backs than they are as runners. So that very well could be the plan is, yeah, we love Chuba. He's going to lead the backfield. We want to give a bit more of the receiving work to these guys that offer us some more upside in that aspect. And that could easily chip away at his value. And, frankly, even if Hubbard arrives as RB17 and finishes the year as RB16, that's not a difference maker. I mean, that's not ultimately killing your roster, but it's not a difference maker. So instead, I'm going to focus on wide receivers or other running backs in that range that are going at the same level, but that could be, RB11, RB10, RB6 for the season, or wide receivers that are going to make a bigger difference than if I wait another round or two at that position.
Yeah, the receiving stuff's definitely the hold up with Hubbard for me. Because he was actually really good as a runner last year, 4th in rush yards over expected per attempt, 7th in yards after contact per attempt. That's among 47 qualifying running backs. But among 37 running backs with 30 plus targets, Hubbard was 36th in both yards per route run and PFF receiving grades. So it would not surprise me at all if one of those new guys, Dowdle or Etienne, took passing down snaps from Hubbard, and that would obviously hurt him quite a bit. So he's at RB17 in both our rankings and ADP, so I think he's fine. But Alvin Kamara goes behind him, which makes it really tough to take Hubbard in these drafts.
Yeah, and one final point on Hubbard, I think it's easy with a player like that, specifically him in this case, but also just that player type, to be like, man, being out on him last year screwed me. I'm not going to be out on him this year. Make sure that you factor in the dramatically increased price on Hubbard this year. Like I said, he could even finish right at that spot, and he's just not making a difference in your season. You can find the running back rankings for your desired format at draftsharks.com right now. You can also find the ADP market index that compares our rankings with the ADPs that we've mentioned in the show and helps you identify the top values at the position, as well as some guys that you should consider fading. Whether it's half PPR, full PPR, best ball, redraft, or any other format, Draft Sharks is here to be your unfair advantage.